Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's afternoon now. I don't know what time it is when you're watching this, but this is yet another episode of What is the Premise? I'm sitting here in the pastoral study of Pastor Bohdan Vedis.
Office today. We're in my office.
That's right. And
Step into my office, sir. We'll have a conversation.
And I myself am Pastor Paul Bieber, his friend and colleague.
Oh, I love that.
So, what is the premise? Today we want to ask the question, what is the premise of the cross?
Oh, that's so deep.
Because it is deep. Because the word about the cross, as you know...
The word about the cross. I like this. What's the word on the street about the cross?
The word about the cross,
word about the
it's
cross.
a stumbling block.
Foolishness.
And foolishness, yet...
To those who are perishing, but to those
who believe it is the power and wisdom of God.
Power! Oh, this might be a good Lutheran verse here.
So,
we might have just introduced people to something called the theology of the
cross.
I love this. We get to be Lutherans today. But
Yes.
this idea that there might be a premise. What is the premise? What you're saying is, to some people, the premise of the cross is foolishness.
That's
and
right.
to other people, the premise of the cross is powerful and transformative.
Absolutely, and it's a thing that, as we know, in the contemporary church, there are many people who are designing contemporary worship spaces who are removing crosses from them. Because,
Why would they do that?
because
Can you have a crossless Christianity?
No, but the idea is you take it out of the worship space because it brings people down. They get very depressed, and even some more Protestant Christians who don't mind the bare cross on the wall get very upset about a crucifix, a cross with a corpus with Jesus on it.
You're bringing this into a good... So what is the premise of a crucifix where you have the cross with Jesus on it? What's the premise of that?
Well,
is he a happy Jesus on there, or is he a sad Jesus?
Oh, no, he usually looks pretty miserable.
He's a dying Jesus.
Yes.
So the idea that the cross is a symbol of sacrifice, suffering. And what would the premise of the empty cross be?
Well, that he's not suffering anymore. Now he's been vindicated, and his cross stands empty to the sky, as one of our hymns puts it.
I like that. So you're saying there's even a premise to, if you have the crucifix with Jesus on it, or the empty one, that message, or what it's trying to communicate. But if we were just going to say, what is the premise of the cross? What is God communicating to humanity? I heard you say it's foolishness to some people, but to other people it's power to those who believe. But how does it? What's the fuel it's giving people? What's the fuel it gives you?
Well, it shows, I think, the central paradox of our faith, which is that
paradox. Do you have a definition for what a paradox is, Paul?
It's something it's really impossible for it to be true, yet it is.
I love that. Yeah, that's what I was told. A paradox is, something which on first look, it seems like these things are mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Like they can't both be true. But then on further investigation, we have to affirm both of these are true.
Like finding your life by losing it. Or the idea that real power is found in humble service, or, these various paradoxes.
You got to die to live.
Exactly. Yeah. And these are the paradoxes that Jesus...
You got to give away to keep.
These are the paradoxes that Jesus taught and that indeed he lived. Because, of course, what the cross really symbolizes, what the premise of the cross is that this was Jesus' destiny from the moment that the angel Gabriel told the Blessed Virgin that she would conceive him. He was born to die. He was born to make that one perfect sacrifice on the cross, which reconciles us to God. So there's a lot of theology packed into there.
There is, and I like the way that you said that it was what Jesus was born to do, and yet when Jesus first predicts it, in the Gospels,
and when he secondly predicts it, and when he thirdly predicts it.
But when he comes and predicts it the first time, Peter takes him aside, according to the Gospel of Mark, and says, yeah, that can't be possibly it. It even uses the word that Peter rebukes him.
That's right. This is not a good plan.
Yeah, the cross is not God's.
This is not the way to be the Messiah.
Because for many people, the cross is failure.
Of course. Exactly.
Defeat, death.
Right. Well, and in fact, Malcolm Muggeridge, 20th century Christian apologist, said that if Christianity were just starting up now, then the symbol that Romans executed people on the cross, and not the good class of people. You could, if you were a Roman citizen,
how do the good people get executed?
They get beheaded.
Really?
If you were a Roman citizen, you got beheaded. But if you were, like the dregs and the offscouring of the earth, then you got crucified. So what Muggeridge said is that the best way that we should think about what the first Christians saw, what the first potential converts saw when they saw Christians using this cross as their symbol, is that it would be like having an electric chair as the symbol of your religion. What's your image? Well, we have this electric chair.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute, because what I was taught, and somebody can fact check me on this. You can fact check me on everything, but on this one, what I was taught is the Romans had different ways of publicly executing you based on what your crime was. So I heard that, why did they burn people at the stake as heretics? Even that continues on in the Roman Empire. Heretics get burned, but burning at the stake was the public execution for forgers.
Ooh.
And so each public way, because we got a lot of different. Romans were really good at killing people. Romans were really good at causing people, a lot of pain and suffering, and they kind of perfected these things.
Pax Romana.
So, like you said, we have the electric chair, we have, lethal injection, we have, there used to be hanging, but those were all just kind of, that's our one uniform way we kill people. The guillotine was the French way. Did you know that until the 1970s, I think, they were still killing people with the guillotine?
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating that, in the 70s, the French were still saying, this is a good way. This is the right way. Well, but, if we think about that premise of the cross, if Jesus, because what is he tried and ultimately found guilty of?
If it was good enough for the French Revolution, Well, of course, his religious trial, the charge was blasphemy.
Right.
But of course,
but they would have stoned him for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in his political trial, it was setting himself up as a king. And there can be no king but Caesar.
Yeah, so sedition. Empire. This is he's got insurrection, which is interesting that Barabbas goes free, who wasn't known and convicted. And so now,
that's ironic.
If Jesus was a revolutionary, and he dies for leading a revolution, I think there is something interesting in that cross. Do you think Jesus chose the mode of his death, or was it just his death?
He chose that he chose the cross. See, here's the thing.
Versus stoning. Why does he, not get stoned by the, because he could have died a lot of different ways. In fact, they try to stone him a couple of different times, right. And he sneaks through it. He gets out of it. He doesn't die, in those ways. He isn't convicted and then killed as a blasphemer. Right. He's convicted and killed as somebody who set himself up as a greater authority.
Yeah, so, you're asking me to speculate here.
Well, the premise.
So here's the thing. You educated me today, because I didn't know that the Romans had umpteen different ways to execute you.
Well, remember, we're going to fact check that a little bit.
So, assuming, without deciding, that basically for somebody who was, just an itinerant rabbi, a nobody, who gets, brought in before the governor and flogged, in the usual sort of way, and then taken out and executed, that this would be the cross. I guess, I think he did probably choose that. And again, just speculating, I would think that it would be so that he could show that his kingdom and his kingship overturns every form of human authority, not just religious authority, but also every political authority as well.
But we may need to fact check it, because the guys who are on his sides, they aren't in trouble for insurrection. they're bandits.
Well, but there's an interesting question there, because they're thieves, they're bandits, but there's Barabbas is also called a bandit.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain amount of fluidity in that terminology. So they may have been involved in something as well. Who knows? And besides that, crime is crime. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time up on the cross.
I'm going to have to ponder that one a little bit. But this premise we were talking about of the cross, and what is it that God wants to make known? What is our message? And as Lutherans, I think what I've heard a little bit is God chooses to reveal himself. God chooses to reveal himself fully, we say, in the cross as Lutherans. And most significantly, he makes it clear to us, not in a way that's expected or normal, but is a surprising, and there's a twist to it, and even kind of a shock to it, or what we would say today is a scandal.
Well, it's a strange and paradoxical revelation, and of course in Lutheran theology, the thing that is generally set up as the opposite of the theology of the cross is a theology of glory. And so obviously a man hanging on a cross and dying is not a glorious figure. And so the whole question of, how could this be God?
I like that. Well, and even this idea that, this is what I was taught about the theology of the cross is, theology of glory says, I'm able to be smart enough to be able to discern what God is doing. I'm able to look at the world around me and with my senses and with my mind, because I'm smart and I'm perceptive. I'll recognize what God is doing. And the reality is, in the cross, none of them recognized what God was doing. In fact, they completely missed it. They completely missed what God was revealing and making known. In fact, I find that, to be one of the most beautiful things to the Lutheran understanding of the cross, that God chooses to reveal himself in a way that is scandalous, shocking, and hard for us to stomach, hard for us to understand. In fact, our understanding is everywhere else. Our understanding of what God is doing is not in the cross, but that God chooses, to reveal himself fully in this, And at this point, I wish I was a better preacher and could really bring this home to everybody. But I hope that simple idea that the premise of the cross is one, that God is making everything that we need to know about who God is and how much God loves us and the forgiveness that's there, that is, fully made known.
In a way that is very, very difficult to wrap your mind around. Gee, we might
make
have
it
to...
clear to me, Pastor Paul. Just make it all sense. And I think that's the verse that we come back to is, this is foolishness in the eyes of the world. This is folly, this is scandal, this is failure. But to those who believe...
And that is, I know you're not real fond of the word mystery, but that's kind of
mysteries.
Okay. But it's kind of it's the mystery of faith. If you look at Isaiah's 4th servant song, this whole notion that he was wounded for our transgressions, by his wounds we are healed. We look at that with our rational minds and say, well, that just can't be. That's not how it works. But in fact, with the eyes of faith, we can see that in this sacrifice, we have been, made right with God. We have been justified, right-wised with God. That central Lutheran understanding of justification. It happens, by grace through faith for Christ's sake, as we, say as Lutherans. And where it happens is on the cross. And only the eye of faith can see this.
Well, we hope that really opened up some things for some people. I think that's a good place.
A can of worms,
to kind of really, have that nugget of the premise of the cross. I think everything we would say after this would kind of confuse the issue. I think maybe this is the moment where we just learn as pastors to kind of just stop. But for me, I really appreciate this opportunity to think together, to talk together, and to grow in understanding of what is that premise. Thanks for joining us on another episode. God bless.
Bye.